I began looking at the military when I was in high school. My sophomore year of college was 9/11, and that was really the tipping point for me.
Another plane just hit.
And we stand together to win the war.
I knew I wanted to go in Special Operations. The Army gave me the chance to go straight into Special Forces, and then based on what we do and how we do it is what I was drawn to.
This is Wolverine 5, you're clear to engage, initial Mike 2 Alpha.
What SF teams really do best is employ ourselves in an environment as a very small element, and then through advising, training, organization, we are able to create a much larger fighting force. Right? What Green Berets really are, above all else, are problem solvers and teachers. That's how we make our money. That's why we get sent places to do stuff. Name is Nick Lavery. I am an active duty member of the United States Army Special Forces, more commonly referred to as the Green Berets, where I serve as a chief warrant officer on a Special Forces detachment. My father in particular really kind of drove in the quiet professional mentality into me as a kid. And my father would continuously educate me on it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And you need to be a man of action and let your actions speak for themselves. Ironically, as it may be or not, when I decided to eventually come into SF, we are referred to as the quiet professionals. So I've had that mentality built into me from a very young age, relatively seamless transition into conducting business as a professional with that same kind of approach. Yeah, I think the difference between training and working out is the intent, the purpose behind what it is you're doing in that moment. It's really having a firm grasp of the why. Why am I walking into this gym right now? And having that vision refined to a degree where it's driving you into the facility. Working out is great. If you go in there and you get a workout in, that's not necessarily mean that you're not focused, you're not taking it seriously. But I think when you're training for something. At work, when we go to the range to train, we are training to be able to go do that in operations. Right? We're not going to the range to just have fun and just kind of go through the motions. It's very deliberate in what we're doing. So there's a strategy that really has already been laid out prior to even entering that facility, where I know that this workout on this day is in line with reaching this particular objective, which is in line with reaching this ultimate end state. When I enter a training environment, whether that's a pool or on a track or in a weight room, my focus is on that upcoming objective, that 25-meter target that I am training for in that moment. And once I get in there, once I get loosened up, the music goes on and I eliminate everything else from my world, then it's just complete and total focus on each activity I'm doing, each task, each specific rep, because I know that those things are all linked together. When you have that sense of purpose behind why you're doing what you're doing, whether it's in the gym or not, is going to take you to another level. First injury in terms of being wounded in action in combat, right? There's a whole list of football injuries and stuff like that, but to get into the meat and potatoes. First time I was wounded in combat was in September of 2012 when I took some shrapnel to the back of my shoulder. blew about a lemon-sized hole in it. Really wasn't a big deal. Was out of the fight for about a week or so until it closed up enough for me to get back on what I needed to do. Second injury, second time I was wounded in combat was in November of 2012 when I took an AK-47 round to the face. Sounds a lot worse than it was. You know, it just grazed me just enough to, you know, rip my cheek open, but another, you know, inch to the right and you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Similar time frame, was Medevac, eventually got it stitched up. They kept an eye on me for a few days to make sure there wasn't any crazy infection, and then I was back with the boys doing my thing pretty much right after that. Third time I was wounded in action was in March of 2013, which I took a bunch of machine gun rounds to both my legs, most of which were into my right leg, which obviously ended up with me losing it. And then a couple nicks here and there throughout that time period and after, and then my next kind of somewhat substantial injury was, I want to say around December of 2016, I was involved in an IED, which rang my bell pretty good. I was not formally treated for that. I wasn't medevaced out. I just kind of dealt with a pretty severe headache for a few days, myself and the rest of the guys that were in that vehicle. There wasn't anything that took me out of the fight for really any period of time at all. March 11th, 2013 began like most of the days did for us. And this is on the back end of our deployment. We had already been there for five and a half months. So we were at the tail end of our trip, right? So not only another maybe 2 or 3 weeks left, and we would be rotating out with the guys coming in behind us. So we had been going, you know, hard in the paint for that amount of time. That was a challenging deployment. A lot of guys were getting banged up. A lot of guys were getting killed, which is exactly the type of deployment we wanted. So we got what we wanted. We had a joint operation plan for that day. When I say joint, I mean it was our team. We had our Afghan National Army Special Forces team that were living with us. We then also had some regular Afghan National Army guys. We had some Afghan National Police guys, and we had some Afghan local police guys. So these are all different units, okay? Which was common for us. Depending on the size of the operation that we were doing, we may need more bodies. They would provide us more bodies. Our SOP, our standard operating procedure that we adopted for these bigger joint missions was the partners would show up. The partner forces would arrive to our camp if that's where we were meeting them, and they would stay outside of our perimeter. The leadership from those elements would come into our motor pool area, which is basically a word for a parking lot where our vehicles would be staged and some other equipment. Our leadership would come in, and our leadership would brief them on what we were doing that day. They would then go tell their troops, and then we would roll, just to keep the amount of bodies that were in our immediate perimeter at a minimum, right? Because it's a vulnerable position when you're there. And this is what we had executed for months. Well, on this particular day, the leadership came in, and a Ford Ranger pickup truck also drove in. Now, at the time, I was a weapons guy. That was my specialty on the team. And the weapons guys are also responsible for base security. So I immediately noticed this. Like, that's a breach of our SOP. And I have to make a decision on whether or not I am going to address that right here and now, or if I'm going to wait and let it ride. I decide to wait, okay? A decision that I have to live with for the rest of my life. Vehicle comes in, and we begin our pre-mission brief, okay? Where are we going, what we're doing, cool. We're doing our radio check, final comms checks, and we're all in basically this massive like circle. And my radio is good to go, yep, I'm up, and I actually turn and start walking away towards my vehicle. that was staged kind of just behind me. And they're finishing off the comms checks. As I'm walking away, I hear gunfire coming from behind me. And one of the Afghan local police guys jumped up on the back of this Ford Ranger that had a truck-mounted PKM machine gun, which is a massive belt-fed machine gun, and just started opening fire into the group. My first instinct when I hear the rounds is that one of our partner force guys just accidentally clacked off a round, which wouldn't be that uncommon to happen. After the third, fourth, fifth round, I'm like, now someone's shooting deliberately and it's coming from right behind me. So I snap my head around and I see this guy in the back of the truck shooting into the crowd. Bodies are falling, people are running. My training tells me to move to cover and eliminate the threat. When I say move to cover, I mean move to something that can stop bullets and then eliminate that problem. That's what we're trained to do. And I ultimately end up not doing that. I don't do that. And the reason why is there was one of our infantry guys who was there. We had an infantry squad that was attached to us, about 15 dudes, who was set to come out on that mission with us that day as one of the drivers for one of our vehicles. Young kid, first deployment ever. And he's basically like a deer in headlights, just frozen. And he's maybe not more than 20 feet from this shooter. And seeing that and processing it, obviously rapidly, superseded my training. So I ended up going for this dude. And I get to him, and he's not more than maybe 10, 12 feet away from me. I get to him and basically put myself in between him and the shooter. And that was when I was hit for the first time. Right, boom, right in the back of my leg. It's like a sledgehammer. So I get knocked on top of this kid, and I feel another couple more impacts into my legs. So I know I'm hit. Okay. Now we got to move to cover. Like, you're actually being shot. Okay. So I drag him and myself to behind one of the trucks that was there. And all this is happening really, really fast. Right? I get to that. I get to a piece of cover, and gunfire is still going on. I grab a rifle that was laying on the ground. One of my teammates had dropped theirs, and I go to get eyes on this threat, and I take a couple really horribly placed shots, and one of my teammates ultimately ends up coming in and eliminates that threat. Now, this was the initiation of a complex ambush. So when this guy started shooting at us, we also started taking machine gun and rockets from outside our perimeter. So now it's a full-on firefight at this point. Immediate threat has been eliminated. I can tell that there are things going on around, but I'm in no position to really address that myself. So I go to my next course action, which is to check the status of this infantry soldier. So I check him. He's got no holes in his body. He's in shock, but he's relatively okay. Next course action, I need to check myself because I know I was hit. So I expose my leg, rip the pants open, and my leg is pretty much just kind of hammered meat at this point, tissue, bone, and I can see this river of blood flowing from where I was laying to where I had initially been hit. And seeing that made me recognize that my femoral artery had been cut. My training tells me with that, I probably have maybe 8 or 9 minutes left-ish before I am drained of blood. So time is of the essence. So I get a tourniquet and I slap that on my leg, wrench it down as tight as I can. Bleeding doesn't stop. I get a second tourniquet, put that on, wrench it down as tight as I can. I still don't think the bleeding has stopped. Right around there, and one of my teammates gets to me, and the look on his face pretty much said it all. And I'm trying to get him away from me, right? I'm like, I'm done. I was convinced that I was dying right there and then. And I didn't want him wasting time on me because I knew that there were people that were wounded all around me. People now are screaming. It's somewhat chaos. And I wanted him to go work on those that could be saved. And I didn't think I was one of them. So I'm telling him to fuck off. And he of course ignores me. You know, he does what he's trained to do. He puts a third tourniquet on my leg. He gets IV access for blood products or fluids if needed. And then his work there is pretty much done. He's done pretty much what he can do. So he moves on to the next guy that needs to be worked on. So I'm laying there and 3 tourniquets on my leg, and I still feel like I'm bleeding out, right? I'm looking, and it is just blood everywhere, but I still feel like I'm bleeding out. And I managed to grab my leg and just kind of lift it up. And I could see blood seeping out of the wound. So I said, nope, the bleeding hasn't stopped yet, and you are really running short on time. Have you done everything? And the answer was no. So I grabbed some gauze out of my personal first aid kit. I loosened up one of the tourniquets, and I just rammed this gauze into my leg. And I'm feeling around, I'm trying to feel a pulse, to feel for the femoral artery, to be able to get direct pressure on top of it. At this point, the blood is shunting inwards to protect my organs, so I really can't feel anything. Like, I got no dexterity. It's like numb. It's like I'm working with these meat mittens. But I think I feel something. You know, I'm scraping past broken bone. Like, the pain is just now really kicking in, like searing pain that's trying to just eject through my eyeballs. And I think I feel something. You know, I just press down as hard as I can. I re-secure the tourniquet on top of it. And then I actually pass out at that point for not long, maybe 10 seconds. Come to, and at that point I was convinced, my work here really is done. Like, I got nothing left. So I pretty much just drugged myself over to one of my teammates who was laying down maybe 5 or 6 feet from me. He had taken a round through his calf, and he had been treated, you know, tourniquet was on. He was in a relatively stable position, not life-threatening. And I just thought that the remaining time I had left on Earth, I would just want to spend trying to comfort those guys the best I could, which is what I did. It took about an hour to an hour and a half, somewhere in there, before a Medevac bird, a helicopter, could land to pick us up, because it was an ongoing fight. So I'm on the ground an hour and a half before I'm Medevac'd out. I get on a bird, and they pull the most severely wounded guys out first. It was me and 2 other dudes. And they had a couple options on where they were gonna send us, right? One was a closer location. It was a shorter flight, but it had a lower level of medical care. They had basically what we refer to as a forward surgical team that was located at this base, which is a hodgepodge of different medical professionals that all kind of come together. They can perform surgeries, they can do stuff, very proficient. It's just not a full-scale hospital. The full-scale hospital was a little bit farther away, so they went with speed versus level of care, which makes a lot of sense. Time was of the essence for us. So they get us to this location, and I need a blood transfusion bad. I am just about out of blood. So they throw me on a blood transfusion, and they start pumping me full of blood. Unfortunately, a mistake was made, and they mixed up my name with my teammate's name, who was on the same flight as me. And they gave me his blood type, which is not compatible to mine. So this essentially kills me, right? I mean, I was already in critical condition as it was, and now I'm being pumped full of incompatible blood type. So everything starts to shut down. My liver and kidneys and organs all start dying, and they aren't sure exactly why, but they know I need to be in a higher level of care. So they put me back on another helicopter, and they send me to Bagram Air Force Base, or Bagram Airfield.
1751, we're gonna haul ass, so if you can keep up, great. If not, we'll meet you there. Okay, we'll bend it over, but I don't think we'll be able to keep up with you.
It's while I'm on that flight, which is not more than maybe like 9 or 10 minutes, that they realize what happened with the blood. So they call the hospital that I'm being flown to, and they tell them, this is what just happened. There's no way this dude survives the flight. Just be prepared to receive his body, and that's gonna be it. So they're like, okay, cool. And I stop here for a second because it actually took me a long time to be able to tell that portion of the story with the blood transfusion, because it's real easy to hear that and, ask yourself, like, how is that possible, right? How is that possible? How can they make such an egregious mistake? And the reality is we live in the world of human error, and when stress is high and adrenaline's pumping, like, people make mistakes, and that's what happened. And I really am protective of our medical community because they saved my life. That I really don't want them judged for a mistake that was made. It's one that I certainly hold no ill will towards any of them for doing. And to be able to fast forward a little bit, because of that incident, a mass distro was sent out to the entire medical community in the area, in that entire region of the world, saying this is what just happened. And they actually updated their blood protocols with how they handle blood and how they administer blood because of what happened to me. So I look at it through that lens, and I was obviously strong enough and lucky enough to be able to survive. But if that hadn't happened to me and those protocols hadn't been updated, who's to say that that mistake wouldn't have happened again, or for the first time, with someone else who was unable to survive? So in a lot of ways, I'm grateful that that happened to me because I was able to survive, and our processes have been updated to mitigate that from happening again in the future. So just an important lesson to be learned. So I'm flown to Bagram, and they're preparing to receive me. I code on that flight at least once, and I get there, and they rush me into surgery anyway. I'm basically clinging on to life by a thread, battling it out with the Grim Reaper. And they hacked my leg off basically below the knee, basically took my foot off to minimize how much damage my body was trying to recover from. Put me on dialysis, put me on a blood transfusion, and I was obviously able to survive. The question that I would really be kind of getting after is faith. The word faith and what that means, which has a strong spiritual, biblical tone to it, feel to it. But a definition of faith is also a belief in something to which no proof exists. That word is one that I focused on early on in recovery and when I was going through my rehab. And I knew then that I was going to get back to my team. I was going to continue doing what I love to do for my profession. The difficulties with that was I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's because I wasn't in a tunnel. Right? There was no linear path where all I need to do is just keep moving forward and I'll get there. And eventually I see that light. In reality, I was traversing up a mountain with jagged rocks in the rain at night by myself going cross country. Right? There's no trail to follow. I'm climbing a mountain blindfolded, acting on pure faith alone, not knowing if what I was trying to obtain even existed. Right? I only felt it in my heart and in my soul that I could get there if I did what I was learning I needed to do over time. I think that's something that can resonate with a lot of people who find themselves lost and trying to figure out what that goal is. What do I want to do? What is my purpose here? Why am I here? Or someone who feels they have that locked in. I know that this is why I was put on this earth. I just don't know how to get to that point. A lot of times, especially when it's something unprecedented, maybe that just may be unprecedented for your family. First person to go to college, first person to start a business, first person to play in the NFL, or whatever it is. You may not have a path to follow. You may not be in a tunnel where you can eventually see that light at the end of it. You may be walking up a jagged, rocky mountain at night, operating purely on faith. So a belief in something to which no proof exists, but you feel it in your soul. Through maintaining that mindset, the development of a sound strategy, the execution of that strategy with consistency, surrounding ourselves with those that are going to push us and be alongside us for that journey is how you're able to do it. The genesis of Machine began when I first deployed back to Afghanistan in 2015 as an amputee. That was my first deployment as a one-legged guy. It didn't take long before the locals and those that we were working alongside of began referring to me as Machine. It was actually Machine Fighter was the phrase that they were using. It caught on pretty quick. And there would be times when we would roll into an area or a village that we had never been to before, and you know, the kids are coming out going, "It's the Machine Fighter, it's the Machine Fighter." So, you know, word of mouth spread pretty fast, which is how communication really happens in those types of areas. So that was the origination of it. No one else called me that. It wasn't a nickname. It still isn't a nickname. My second deployment as an amputee was to Eastern Africa. The same thing happened. So I'm in an entirely different continent at this point. And within a month or so, it began as them calling me computer, which was their word for cyborg. They didn't have it in the Swahili language. And then that eventually translated into machine. So it began as me as an individual, just what I had been experienced with work. What it has morphed into and what I seek it to continue to grow into is far beyond me as a person, right? It's an idea, it's a philosophy, if you will. It's a methodology with a series of tools that are built into it, which really are all derived from different components. Components coming in the form of individuals and their ideas and their passions and their beliefs. So like any real machine, it has different pieces, and those different pieces, those different components are able to work together towards a specific end state. So I see the machine brand, the machine entity as a combination of like-minded individuals, those with ambition, desire, those that are driven, and those that believe in creating an impact. That's really what it boils down to. Right? We seek to create positive impact, positive influence by demonstrating that anything is possible when you surround yourself with the right people and you have the right mindset and you have the right strategy and you execute on that with consistency. The only obstacles that exist are the ones that we place within ourselves.
Nick selflessly and repeatedly risked his life for our nation, for his comrades in arms, and most importantly, he accomplished what our nation needed him to do every time he left our shores.
So I think that there is a higher degree or a higher level of productivity and output and production that exists within every single person. I also think that few are able or have been able to actually tap into that level of work ethic. For many, including myself, it takes or it took a significant, somewhat life-altering event and getting past that to be able to begin having that access to that level of production. Mine was getting my legs shot off by a machine gun and then having to grind through that and just take everything up another notch and then another notch to get back to doing what I wanted to do. That was the catalyst for me. I think that there are really two aspects of life and two aspects of us as human beings that are critical components to gaining that level of output. And that's pain and fear, genetically coded within all of us. They're alerts that are built into our body within a security system, if you will, in our brains. Looking at those two realities, those two variables of us as humans, and adjusting our interpretation of them and our response to them, I think is a key aspect of a higher degree of work ethic. Because when discomfort comes in, 9 times out of 10, those individuals are stopping. I'm in pain. My body is telling me to stop. I need to stop. It's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's Mother Nature. Again, we're genetically built to act as such. But when you're training for anything, it is in those moments of pain and pushing beyond that that really leads to growth. Discomfort's discomfort. It applies to social, it can apply to your education, it can apply to your professional career. Discomfort is discomfort. And when we're able to push beyond that, I think it opens up access to a higher degree of productivity. That in itself, that one particular task, can really open up people's eyes. I've seen it happen, and it's happened on me, where, wow, I actually can do that. It was scary, but I did it. And you know what? It really wasn't that difficult. Like, what else can I do? What else scares me that if I just commit to it and get past it, and you start to compound those events over time, it begins to build a different degree of output that we're able to put into our training and whatever it is that we're doing. This is not a dress rehearsal. We have one shot at this life. It is up to each and every one of us as individuals to ensure that it is one of happiness and one of success, which are interwoven. Every person on earth is a miracle, statistically. Why not go at it hard? It is those to my left and right that truly fuel the relentless pursuit of excellence.
Sergeant Nick Lavery served many tours, several deployments.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant First Class and UMass Law graduate, Nick Lavery.
I am willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that they have the same opportunities that we have now.
Victory or Valhalla, 3-5 or die, dare press or liber. Pain and fear and our relationship with them are two aspects of us that once we gain control of them, and again, our response to them is going to facilitate a higher degree of work ethic and productivity. The line between determination and madness, there is a very thin line, I would say, that exists between controlled obsession and craziness. If you're going all in towards something, to a degree, you need to be a little crazy. You need to be willing to do things and think a certain way that is unorthodox, right? It's not the norm. It's unusual. You need to be able to push the envelope, right? We talked about pain, fear, failure. You need to be willing to go to that place, to those places that most don't go to. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, knowing we're gonna make mistakes, right? There'll be times when I'm not pushing it hard enough, and there's times when I push it a little too hard, right? And just keeping that balance and finding that line, knowing we're not gonna stay on it. I think that road right there, that thin line, is the line to success. Man, it's important. You know, diet is a word that gets used a lot, and I think it scares a lot of people. It's got a lot of pain associated with it. Like, I'm gonna go on a diet. Like, it's restrictive. Think of diet, you're thinking, I'm gonna withhold something from my body, which is probably necessary. Having a solid nutrition program is really just more about making consistent choices, you know, throughout your day. So nutrition for me is vital. The reality is, depending on where I am and what I'm doing for work, means that I have to be able to adapt to my environment. There are times when I just flat out don't have a grocery store down the street. I don't have a kitchen to cook food in.
My son loves pears. He will absolutely crush some pears. Snack for my 4-year-old. It's like a Cheeto popcorn blend. And if I get the wrong one, I will have hell to pay. And I don't see it, of course.
Do the best with what you have, right? Recognize that you're gonna lose some gains, right? If we're talking like physical fitness and health and nutrition, if I'm going to someplace in an austere location for 2 months or 5 months or whatever, like I'm gonna lose some strength, right? I'm gonna put on some body fat perhaps, but it's a requirement of the job, you know? So having a solid understanding of nutrition allows you to make those adjustments on the fly with what you have at your disposal and still, you know, live a nutritious lifestyle.
Also not for me. The life of a dad. Some of the combinations and flavors over here are fantastic. I've actually contemplated getting some for myself. Banana, blackberry, blueberry, yup. Carrot, sweet potato, pea. That's just gains right there, man.
When I'm home and I'm in kind of more of a regular kind of schedule, I leave the house, it's, you know, wallet, keys, phone, cooler. Most people leave the house, it's wallet, keys, phone, and like I got all my essentials. If you can get yourself to a place where a cooler is considered as vital of an item as your keys, wallet, phone, you're in a great place. Because without it, you feel uncomfortable. Think about if you leave your phone at home, people will lose their minds. Like the earth has just swallowed them up, like they don't exist anymore. If I forget to bring my cooler with food, I have that same feeling. Like, oh man, I forgot, it's an important item. You know, so prioritizing it, I think is key. Getting yourself to a point where it just becomes routine to buy and prep healthy, nutritious foods, and then instill the will and the discipline to avoid the things that really aren't in our best interest. That is really what separates those who are able to make sustained physical progress and reach higher levels than the average.
All right, man, let's roll.
Today is my general physical preparedness, lower body focus is what we're doing today. Which is like GPP is another word or an acronym for that phrase. Functional fitness kind of gets used a lot as well. They're relatively synonymous. So I have kind of more of a traditional leg day as part of my program. Today, I will train legs, but it's also more about training my core and working on balance. How do I balance things? You know, I'll just say off the bat that balance is a word that I typically don't use. I think it paints an inaccurate perspective in people's minds where they think of like a seesaw. And the goal is to create this balance where it just is level the entire time. You know, I'm putting the exact amount of emphasis, time, energy into both or all aspects, and things are level. That's unrealistic, right? So rather than looking at balance, I like to look at priorities and focus, right? What are my priorities? My macro priorities. And for me, it's very simple. I have my family, I have my profession, I have my training and my nutrition, I have my education. That's really it. Like those 4 pillars really is what makes up my time. And those are prioritized as they need to, right? My family, it's easy to say my family is always my number 1 priority, and it is. However, there are times when I'm about to conduct a military combat operation where I need to prioritize that. Well, really then we're talking about focus, right? And focus is where we shift off of what may be a higher priority into something that needs my attention right now. Knowing that you are going to give up some of that energy that's going towards these other things, these other aspects of your life, those are gonna tip because you only have so much time and energy to focus on X number of things. So perfect balance doesn't exist. We need to recognize that we want our priorities straight. We know what's important to us, but we also know there will be times when I have to focus on other aspects of my life, even if it's a lower priority. You know, I like to quote Colonel Hal Moore, who ended up being Lieutenant General Hal Moore. He was a colonel in Vietnam. And he was asked the question, how do you balance being a soldier and a father and a husband? And his response, which I think is perfect, is I'd like to think that being good at the one makes me better at the other. And I'm reminded of that constantly because if you think about what it takes to be a good soldier, discipline, structure, work ethic, commitment, dedication, right? All these admirable qualities and these values that we live by, and you apply them to your family life, it's going to make you a better husband and father, right? You can also extract aspects of your life as a family man, love, compassion, right? Education, mentorship, and you apply that to your professional life, it's gonna make you a better teammate, leader, decision maker, right? So one fuels the other. And you know, it can get kind of easy to look at a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL or anyone that's in these extreme industries as, you know, living this high intensity, high octane, super secretive lifestyle, just 24/7. But it's really not the case. You know, most of us are married. A lot of us have kids, myself being, you know, one of them. So, you know, we go to work like anybody else. And even though, you know, it's high adrenaline and high energy, and the stakes are high, when you come home, you know, you're a dad and you're, you know, a husband, and you play that game with the same level of intensity and commitment that you do as a Special Forces operator. My priorities are what they are. They've been established. I shift my focus as I need to. When I am at work, it requires 100% of my focus. When I'm with my family, it requires 100% of my focus. And I just have to be willing to relinquish attention towards these other aspects and live in that moment at that time. What's next for me? Well, what's next for me is I have another about 5 years left of active duty service until I reach that 20-year mark, which is that point of retirement. And I intend to see that through to the end, at least to that point. I look at it as a personal and professional goal, something I set my sights on years ago. So I do want to see that through to the end. You know, I talked about staying on the team, staying on the detachment for as long as I can. You know, what that really means is for as long as I'm an asset. And, you know, I just need to be honest with myself and be able to have those difficult conversations with the guys I work with to determine at what point do I reach that point, you know, because it's coming, right? You can't do this forever, regardless of whether or not you're injured or not, man. It runs its course. So not knowing when that point is, you know, I really just want to enjoy the time I have left on the team, because life is very different, you know, once you're no longer in that environment. So really just savor it while I can and continue to learn and lead the guys I get to work with. You know, beyond that, as I start to look kind of long term and what my life looks like post-military, because, you know, 5 years goes by like nothing. It's going to be here pretty quick. And I'm blessed because I'm currently in a profession, I live a lifestyle of one of both passion and purpose. I'm fortunate where I have already identified what my next purpose is going to be. And really, you know, it's a continued life of service, just kind of through a different conduit, and how I do that, you know, as a civilian. So working, you know, as a consultant, as a speaker, as an advisor, as a coach, as a mentor, is something I'm looking forward to. You know, how that ends up happening. You know, my first book is done and will be out here in December, January timeframe. The book is titled Objective Secure, which is a tactical phrase that we use, primarily when we're conducting direct action type raids. And when you reach a certain point within that operation, it's known as Objective Secure, which means that we've established a foothold in this location. We've got some freedom of movement to move around before we move on to the next phase of the operation. So it's a tactical term. The book kind of uses that terminology as a part of progressing towards a goal. And you have these long-term goals that are going to take months or years to achieve. And oftentimes it's so daunting that the pressure prevents us from even beginning. It's like, how am I going to accomplish this? You know, I want to play in the NFL. I want to build a 6,000 square foot house for my family. Like, these monster goals and dreams that everybody has can seem so overwhelming that we don't even begin to move forward towards them. You have your long-term goal, but along that journey, you have a series of objectives that need to be met. And when you kind of just strategically break that down into smaller, more obtainable goals, one objective at a time, that's the meaning behind the title. So we reach our ultimate goal by securing one objective at a time. Boom, 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 boom. You know, so it's the intent behind it really is to enable those seeking to overcome adversity, those seeking success in whatever term, whatever definition that means to that person. It's a tool to enable people to accomplish, you know, their goals and their dreams.
Go once. Hey. Up. Yep. Up. Oh. Hey. Up.
I'm driven primarily by my family. That comes first before everything else. They're really at the core of the why behind essentially everything I do. My profession then comes up pretty close to that. And I'm fortunate to be in a profession, have a chance to do what I do for a living, and that being something that I love, which I think is just a key ingredient in striving for success, because the obstacles are inevitable. The adversity is inevitable. And if you're not running into those challenges, then you're either pursuing something that's too easy for you, or you're not moving aggressive enough. The idea is to be able to fall down. Know you're gonna fall down, but the love and the passion and the purpose behind what you are driving towards is essential in what it takes to get past those hard times.
Come on.